The ink on the divorce papers was barely dry when Ethan Prescott laughed, tossing the document onto the mahogany table like a piece of trash. "Finally," he sneered, wrapping an arm around the younger, sharper woman beside him. "I'm free of the dead weight." In the corner, his mother Victoria swirled her wine, smirking at the woman, packing her meagre belongings into a cardboard box. They thought they were discarding a simple, penniless housewife who didn't understand the world of business. They didn't know that the dead weight they were mocking was actually Charlotte Wellington, the silent owner of the very conglomerate Ethan was begging to acquire his failing company. They weren't just signing a divorce, they were signing their own death warrants. The grandfather clock in the hallway of the Prescott estate chimed 7 times, the sound echoing off the cold marble floors like a funeral toll. It was supposed to be a celebration. It was Ethan and Charlotte's 3rd wedding anniversary, but the atmosphere in the dining room was thick enough to choke on. Charlotte sat at the foot of the long, polished table. She had spent the afternoon preparing the roast beef exactly the way Ethan liked it, rare with a side of horseradish cream, only to be told upon serving it that they were waiting for a guest. She looked down at her hands. They were red from scrubbing the floors earlier that day. Despite marrying into the wealthy Prescott family, Charlotte had never been treated as a wife. To Victoria, Prescott the matriarch whose icy gaze could freeze a burning fire, Charlotte was nothing more than glorified help. "Stop fidgeting, Charlotte," Victoria snapped from the head of the table. She adjusted her pearl necklace, her eyes narrowing. "It makes you look nervous and guilty." "I'm sorry, Victoria," Charlotte said softly, placing her hands in her lap. I thought we were eating at 6. The food is getting cold." "We eat when Ethan says we eat," Victoria retorted. "He's closing the biggest deal of his life this week, the merger with the Wellington Group. But I suppose that means nothing to you. You've never worked a day in your life." Charlotte bit her lip to stifle a laugh. The Wellington Group, if only they knew. Just then, the heavy oak doors swung open. Ethan strode in, looking every bit the rising architectural star he believed himself to be. He was handsome with a jawline that could cut glass and expensive suits that hid the fact his firm was leveraged to the hilt. But he wasn't alone. Hanging onto his arm, dressed in a red silk dress that cost more than Charlotte's entire wardrobe, was Jessica. Jessica was the daughter of one of the city's minor investors. She was loud, flashy, and had been Ethan's assistant for the past 6 months. Charlotte knew. She had seen the texts. She had smelled the perfume, but she had stayed hoping Ethan would remember the man he used to be when they met in a coffee shop 3 years ago, back when he was humble, and she was just Charlie. Ethan. Charlotte stood up her napkin, sliding to the floor. What is she doing here? Ethan didn't even look at her. He pulled out a chair for Jessica right next to his mother. "Sit down, Charlotte. We need to talk." Jessica smirked, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder as she sat. "Hi, Charlotte. The roast looks dry." Victoria chuckled, sipping her Chardonnay. "Finally some color at this table. Jessica, darling, you look stunning." "Thank you, Victoria," Jessica cooed. "Ethan has told me so much about your exquisite taste." Charlotte remained standing, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ethan, it's our anniversary." "I know what day it is," Ethan said, his voice devoid of emotion. He finally turned to look at his wife, his eyes cold and hard. "That's why I chose today. It seemed poetic to end it on the day it started." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick manila envelope. He slid it across the table. It stopped right in front of Charlotte's empty plate. "Divorce papers," Ethan stated flatly. The room went silent, save for the clinking of Jessica's fork against the china as she picked at the roast. "You're joking," Charlotte whispered. "I don't joke about my future," Ethan replied. "Look at you, Charlotte. Look at this." He gestured vaguely at her simple cotton dress and her lack of jewelry. "I'm about to become a partner with the Wellington Group. I'm going to be a global player. I need a wife who fits the part, a wife who brings connections, capital, and class to the table. You bring laundry detergent and silence." "I supported you," Charlotte said, her voice trembling, though not with tears. It was rage. "When you started the firm, who stayed up managing the books, who organized your schedule, who comforted you when the bank threatened foreclosure." "Administrative work," Victoria scoffed, waving a hand dismissively. "Any minimum wage secretary could do that. Jessica, on the other hand, has introduced Ethan to 3 major developers this month alone." "And," Jessica added, leaning forward with a predatory glint in her eyes, "I'm pregnant." The air left the room. Charlotte looked from Jessica's smug face to Ethan's defiant one. "It's a boy." Ethan said, a swell of pride in his voice that he had never shown Charlotte. "An heir. Something you obviously couldn't provide." That was the low blow. They both knew Charlotte couldn't conceive due to a medical complication, a complication she had told Ethan about before they married, and one he swore didn't matter. Charlotte slowly reached out and touched the envelope. "You want a divorce because I'm not high status enough for you, because you think you've outgrown me." "It's just business, Charlotte," Ethan said, pouring himself a glass of wine. "Don't make a scene. The terms are fair. You get the old Honda, and I'll give you $20,000 cash to start over. But you leave the house tonight. Jessica is moving in." "Tonight?" Charlotte asked. "Tonight," Victoria commanded. "I won't have this dragging on. Sign the papers, take the check, and go back to whatever trailer park you crawled out of." Charlotte looked at the 3 of them. The ambitious, adulterous husband, the cruel, class-obsessed mother, the grasping mistress. They looked like a painting of greed. She didn't cry. The sadness she expected to feel was instantly incinerated by a cold, sharp clarity. She opened the envelope. She didn't read the terms. She didn't ask for a lawyer. She took a pen from her pocket, a cheap ballpoint, and signed her name with a steady hand. Charlotte Wellington. She usually signed Prescott, but today she reverted to her birth name. They were too busy gloating to notice the difference. "Done," Charlotte said, sliding the papers back. "Good girl," Ethan said, relieved. He tossed a checkbook onto the table. "I'll write the check now." "Keep it," Charlotte said, her voice dropping an octave, losing its soft, submissive edge. "You're going to need every penny." "Excuse me," Jessica laughed. "Is that a threat?" Charlotte turned, walking toward the door. She didn't look back. "It's not a threat, Jessica. It's financial advice." The heavy front door of the Prescott estate clicked shut behind her, sealing off the warmth and light of the mansion. Outside, the night was crisp. A light rain had begun to fall, misting the windshield of the 10-year-old Honda Civic that sat in the driveway, the only asset she had been allowed to keep. Charlotte stood on the porch for a moment, listening to the muffled laughter coming from the dining room. They were toasting, celebrating her removal like she was a tumor excised from the family body. She walked to the car, opened the trunk, and threw in the single box she had packed earlier that morning. She had known this was coming. Not the pregnancy, perhaps, but the end. Ethan had been distant for months, hiding his phone, coming home smelling of designer gin and deception. She had prepared. She slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled of old coffee and the vanilla air freshener she bought to mask the scent of Ethan's gym bag. She put the key in the ignition, but didn't turn it. Instead, she reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a sleek, black, secure line phone. It was a device she hadn't powered on in 3 years. She held the power button. The screen flared to life, displaying a simple logo, a golden W intertwined with a laurel wreath. She dialed a single number. It rang once. "Ms. Wellington." A deep, cultured voice answered. It was Arthur, the Chief of Staff for Wellington Holdings, and the man who had raised her after her parents died in the plane crash that left her the sole heiress to a $40 billion empire. "It's done, Arthur," Charlotte said. Her voice was unrecognizable from the meek housewife who had just been thrown out. It was steel and ice. "I am sorry to hear that, Charlotte. Or perhaps congratulations are in order," Arthur asked gently. He signed the divorce papers. He's with a woman named Jessica now, and he's expecting the merger meeting on Monday. "He is," Arthur confirmed. "The board is preparing the final contracts for the acquisition of Prescott Architecture. They believe they are acquiring a promising firm with a brilliant leader." "Pause the contracts," Charlotte commanded. "Pause them. Cancel the acquisition offer," she said, watching the lights of the house flicker in the rearview mirror. "And initiate Protocol Red on Prescott Architecture. I want a forensic audit of their accounts starting tomorrow morning. Every invoice, every permit, every tax filing." "That is aggressive," Arthur noted, though she could hear the smile in his voice. "And the meeting on Monday." "Keep the meeting," Charlotte said, "but change the location. Boardroom A, the penthouse level, and Arthur, yes, Ms. Wellington. Make sure the security team knows that Mr. Prescott is not to be treated as a VIP. He's a vendor, a failing one." "Understood. Where will you be staying? The penthouse is prepared." "I'm coming home, Arthur. Send the car to the intersection of 5th and Main. I'm leaving this junk heap there." Charlotte started the Honda. As she backed out of the driveway, she saw the silhouette of Ethan in the window, raising a glass of champagne. He looked like a king surveying his kingdom. "Enjoy it, Ethan," she whispered. "It's the last drink you'll ever enjoy." She drove to the designated intersection, a quiet spot downtown. Waiting there, idling by the curb, was a convoy of 3 black SUVs. A tall man in a dark suit stepped out of the lead vehicle, a Rolls-Royce Phantom. Arthur looked older than she remembered, his hair fully white now, but his posture was as rigid as ever. He opened the back door of the Phantom. "Welcome back, Madam Chairwoman," Arthur said, bowing his head slightly. Charlotte stepped out of the Honda, leaving the keys in the ignition and the door wide open. She didn't even look at it. She slid into the leather interior of the Rolls-Royce, instantly enveloped in a world she had left behind for love, a love that had turned out to be a cheap forgery. "Arthur," Charlotte said, as the car pulled away, merging seamlessly into the city traffic. "Get me the file on Jessica's father's investments, and get me the best intellectual property lawyer in the city. Ethan thinks he's an architect. I'm going to remind him that half his genius designs were sketched on napkins by his wife." Arthur handed her a tablet. "Way ahead of you, and the family Victoria." Charlotte swiped through the tablet, her face illuminated by the blue light of the screen. Victoria cares about 2 things, her social standing and her charity gala next weekend. Buy the venue. Buy the venue. Buy the hotel that is hosting the gala. Cancel her reservation. Tell them we're doing renovations. Arthur chuckled. "Very good." It begins. The weekend passed in a blur of hedonistic celebration for the Prescotts. Ethan and Jessica spent Saturday shopping for baby clothes and looking at penthouses they couldn't quite afford yet. But Ethan was confident. The Wellington deal was a lock. It was a $40 million buyout. He would be the COO of the new division. He was untouchable. Victoria spent her time calling her circle of friends, subtly dropping hints that Ethan had finally trimmed the fat, and that the family was about to ascend to a new tax bracket. She painted Charlotte as a tragic, clinging figure who had to be paid off to leave. On Monday morning, Ethan dressed in his best Italian suit. He checked his reflection in the mirror. "You look like a billionaire," Jessica purred from the bed, rubbing her stomach. "Not yet." Ethan grinned, adjusting his tie, "But by noon I will be close." He grabbed his briefcase. "I'll see you at dinner. Make a reservation at Le Monde. We're going to celebrate properly." Ethan drove to the Wellington Tower, the tallest skyscraper in the city. It was a monolith of glass and steel that dominated the skyline. As he pulled up to the valet, he tossed his keys to the attendant with a swagger. "Keep it close, I won't be long," Ethan said. He walked into the lobby, expecting to be greeted by a team of executives. Instead, he was met by a stone-faced security guard. "Name?" the guard asked, not looking up from his clipboard. "Ethan Prescott, CEO of Prescott Architecture. I have a meeting with the board." The guard ran a finger down a list. Prescott. Right. Vendor. You're not on the VIP elevator list. You'll have to take the service elevator to the 40th floor, then transfer." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me, I'm acquiring a division of this company. There must be a mistake." "No mistake, sir. Badge." The guard slapped a plastic visitor badge on the counter. Fuming, Ethan snatched the badge. Just a clerical error, he told himself. "Once I sign the deal, I'll have this guard fired." He rode the service elevator up, squeezed in between a catering cart and a janitor. It smelled of bleach, a scent that uncomfortably reminded him of Charlotte. He brushed the thought away. When he finally reached the top floor, he was directed not to the main conference room he had seen in magazines, but to a waiting area outside the boardroom. He sat there for 20 minutes, then 40. By the time the heavy double doors opened, Ethan was sweating. His confidence was beginning to fray at the edges. "Mr. Prescott," a young assistant called out. "The board will see you now." Ethan stood up, smoothing his suit. "About time." He walked into the boardroom. It was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city. A long table sat in the center. Seated around it were 12 people, men and women in suits that cost more than Ethan's car. They were the titans of industry. He recognized a few faces from the news. But the chair at the head of the table, the chairman's seat, was turned away, facing the window. "Gentlemen, ladies," Ethan said, projecting his CEO voice. "Thank you for having me. I assume the paperwork is ready." A man with white hair and a stern face, Arthur spoke up from the right of the chairman's seat. "Mr. Prescott, please sit." Ethan sat. He felt small. "Before we proceed to the acquisition," Arthur said, opening a folder, "we have a few questions regarding the financial disclosures of Prescott Architecture." "Everything is in order," Ethan said quickly. My ex-wife, handled the books, but I've reviewed them personally." "Yes, we know," Arthur said. "We found some discrepancies, specifically regarding the ownership of the intellectual property. The Skyline project, the Viridian eco-homes." "These are your flagship designs, correct?" "That's right," Ethan beamed. "My masterpieces." "Funny," Arthur said, "because according to the metadata on the original KD files and the witness testimony of the registered notary, those designs were copyrighted by a C. Wellington." Ethan frowned. "C. Wellington?" "No, that's. Charlotte used to help me with the software. She just put her name on the file login. She's a housewife. She doesn't know architecture." "Is that so?" The voice came from the head of the table. The leather chair slowly swiveled around. Ethan's jaw dropped. His brain couldn't process the image in front of him. Sitting in the chairman's seat was Charlotte. But it wasn't the Charlotte he knew. This woman was wearing a tailored white power suit that radiated authority. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was sleek and straight. She wore diamonds, real ones, at her throat. Her eyes were sharp, devoid of the warmth he had taken for granted for 3 years. "Hello, Ethan," she said coolly. "Charlotte," Ethan stammered, standing up. What are you doing here? How did you get in here? Security." He looked around the table for help, but the board members just stared at him with looks of pity and amusement. "Sit down, Ethan," Charlotte commanded. The authority in her voice cracked like a whip. Ethan's knees gave out. He sat. "I don't understand. Are you the secretary?" "Secretary." Charlotte laughed a dry, humorless sound. "I own the building, Ethan. I own the table you're sitting at. I own the bank that holds your mortgage. I am Charlotte Wellington, majority shareholder and chairwoman of Wellington Holdings." "No," Ethan whispered. You're Charlie. You're poor. You scrubbed the floors. I scrubbed the floors because I wanted to build a life with you," Charlotte said, leaning forward. "I wanted to be loved for me, not my money. I hid my identity to see if you were a man of character." She paused, her eyes narrowing. "You failed." "But the merger—" Ethan gasped, trying to salvage the only thing he understood. "The deal. 40 million. "There is no deal," Charlotte said, picking up a document from the table, the contract he had come to sign. She ripped it in half. The sound tore through the silence of the room. "I didn't bring you here to buy your company, Ethan. I brought you here to bury it." Arthur slid a new document across the table. "This is a cease and desist," Arthur explained. "We are suing Prescott Architecture for intellectual property theft. We have proof that Charlotte designed your key projects. We are also freezing your assets pending an investigation into the misuse of funds, specifically using company accounts to fund a mistress's lifestyle." "You can't do this," Ethan cried, his face turning pale. "We're married community property. You signed the divorce papers on Friday," Charlotte reminded him, holding up the signed decree. "And you explicitly waived your right to any discovery of my assets in exchange for me not asking for alimony. You wanted a clean break. Remember? You got it." Ethan felt like the room was spinning. He thought of Jessica waiting at the restaurant. He thought of his mother bragging on the phone. "Charlotte, please." Ethan begged, his voice cracking. "We can talk about this. I still love you. Jessica meant nothing. It was just stress. I'll leave her. I'll come back. We can run this together. Imagine what we could do. The Wellington and Prescott Empire." Charlotte looked at him with pure disgust. "There is no Prescott Empire, Ethan. There is just a shell company run by a fraud." She pressed a button on the intercom. "Security, escort Mr. Prescott out and remove his visitor badge. He's banned from all Wellington properties, including the parking garage." "Charlotte!" Ethan screamed as 2 large guards hoisted him up by his arms. "You can't do this to me. My mother will destroy you. Tell Victoria I said hello," Charlotte called out as he was dragged toward the door. "And tell her to check her email. I believe she just lost the venue for her gala." As the door slammed shut, Charlotte let out a long breath. She looked around the table at her board members. "My apologies for the domestic disturbance," she said, smoothing her suit jacket. "Now shall we discuss the acquisition of the real architectural firm we've been eyeing, the one in London?" "Agreed, Madam Chairwoman," the board murmured. But Charlotte knew this was just the first domino. Ethan was broken, but he was desperate, and Victoria was a viper who wouldn't go down without spitting venom. The war had just begun. Ethan Prescott did not look like a rising star of architecture when he stumbled through the front door of his mother's estate. He looked like a man who had been dragged through a hurricane. His expensive Italian suit was soaked from the rain, his car having been impounded the moment he stepped out of the Wellington Tower, and his eyes were wide with a manic, terrified energy. "Where is the check?" Victoria didn't even look up from her tablet as he entered the drawing room. She was frantically typing emails trying to salvage the venue for her gala. "And why are you wet? Did you sell the car already?" Jessica was lounging on the chaise eating grapes. "Did you get the 40 million baby? I saw a ring at Tiffany's that would look perfect on my finger." Ethan fell to his knees on the Persian rug. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "There is no money," he rasped. "There is no deal." Jessica sat up, the grapes rolling off her lap. "What do you mean you said it was a lock?" "She's her," Ethan whispered, staring at the floor. "Charlotte. She's the chairman." Victoria finally looked up. Her eyes, usually cold and calculated, narrowed in confusion. "Speak clearly, Ethan. You're babbling. Charlotte is who?" "Charlotte is Charlotte Wellington." Ethan shouted, his voice cracking. "She owns the Wellington Group. She owns the tower. She owns everything. She's a billionaire mother. And we treated her like a maid." The silence that followed was heavy and suffocating. "That's impossible," Jessica scoffed, though her voice wavered. "She wore clothes from Target. She drove a 10-year-old Civic. She cooked your dinner." "It was a test." Ethan grabbed his hair, pulling at the roots. "She wanted to see if I loved her for her, and I failed. I failed, and now she's destroying us. She cancelled the merger. She's suing us for intellectual property theft. She's freezing the accounts." Victoria stood up slowly. She walked over to her son and, without a flicker of emotion, slapped him hard across the face. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "Pull yourself together," Victoria hissed. "You are a Prescott. We do not grovel." "But she has billions," Ethan whimpered, holding his cheek. "She can buy and sell us 1,000 times over." "Money is power." "Yes," Victoria said, pacing the room, her mind working furiously. "But perception is also power, and right now nobody knows this but us." "She knows," Ethan said. "The board knows." "The board is tight-lipped," Victoria dismissed. "They won't speak to the press until legal gives the okay. We have a window." "A window to do what?" Jessica asked, looking between them. "If she's really a billionaire, I'm out of here. I'm not signing up for poverty." "You stay right there, you little fool," Victoria snapped. "You are carrying the Prescott air. That is our leverage." Victoria walked to the window, watching the rain lash against the glass. "Charlotte may have money, but she has spent the last 3 years playing the role of a pathetic housewife. She has no public profile, no social capital. To the world, she is a nobody." "So?" Ethan asked. "So?" Victoria turned, a cruel smile curling her lips. "We control the narrative. We strike first. We go to the press. We tell them that Charlotte is a mentally unstable woman who is delusional. We tell them she sabotaged your company out of spite because you left her. We paint her as the villain before she can even step into the light." "She'll sue us for libel," Ethan said. "Let her." Victoria waved a hand. "Court cases take years. By the time the truth comes out, your reputation will be secured, and we will have found new investors who pity the poor man targeted by his crazy ex-wife. We will turn her billions into a weakness. We'll claim she used her family's money to bully a small business owner." "That's diabolical," Jessica said, a slow smile spreading across her face. "I like it. I can cry on camera. I'm good at crying." "Excellent," Victoria said. "The gala is cancelled, but the press is still hungry for a story. We will host an exclusive truth dinner tomorrow night here at the estate. We'll invite the top journalists and the city's elite. We will expose Charlotte as a fraud before she can execute us." Just then the house lights flickered, and died. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen cut out. The estate was plunged into darkness. "What now?" Jessica shrieked. Ethan fumbled for his phone, the screen illuminating his pale face. "It's a text from the power company. Service suspended at the request of the property owner." "We own the property," Victoria growled. "No," Ethan said, scrolling down. "The mortgage, the bank sold the note this afternoon, to a holding company, Wellington Holdings." Victoria realized her voice dropping to a whisper. "She bought the house. She cut the power." Victoria stood in the dark, her hands balled into fists. "She wants to play in the mud fine. I was born in the mud." She turned to the shadow of her son. "Get the generator running, and Ethan, call the tabloids. Tell them we have a story that will rock the city. The secret life of the billionaire housewife. We are going to burn her to the ground." The generator roared in the backyard, powering the floodlights that illuminated the Prescott estate. It was a beacon of desperation in the dark neighborhood. Victoria had called in every favor she had left. Caterers were setting up tables in the grand ballroom. The finest champagne bought on credit cards that were hours away from being declined flowed freely. The room was packed. Reporters from the city's major newspapers, gossip bloggers, and the social elite who smelled blood in the water were all there. They weren't there to support the Prescotts. They were there for the spectacle. Victoria stood on a raised platform at the front of the room, dressed in a silver gown that looked like armor. Ethan stood to her right, looking solemn. Jessica sat on a chair to the left, holding a handkerchief, looking fragrantly tragic. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victoria began, her voice amplified by a microphone. "Thank you for coming on such short notice. We are here tonight to address the rumors circulating about Prescott architecture and the recent attacks on our family." The cameras flashed blindingly bright. "My son, Ethan," Victoria continued, placing a hand on his shoulder, "has been the victim of a calculated campaign of corporate sabotage, and the perpetrator is none other than his ex-wife, Charlotte." A murmur went through the crowd. "Charlotte," Ethan stepped forward, his voice practiced and somber, "was a woman I loved. But she struggled with reality. When I told her I was leaving, she snapped. She has used her family's hidden wealth she lied about for years to buy my debt hack, my systems, and try to destroy my livelihood. She is a vindictive, unstable woman who is using her money to silence the truth. She even cut the power to our home," Jessica sobbed into the microphone. "She's trying to kill my baby with stress." The reporters scribbled furiously. It was a juicy angle, the evil secret billionaire versus the hard-working family. "We will not be bullied," Victoria shouted, raising a fist. "We will stand for boom." The double doors at the back of the ballroom didn't just open, they were thrown wide. The room went silent. Standing in the doorway was not a security guard and not the police. It was Charlotte. She wore a dress of midnight blue velvet that seemed to absorb the light. She walked with a stride that terrified Ethan. Flanking her were 4 men, Arthur, 2 lawyers carrying thick briefcases, and a man Ethan didn't recognize holding a laptop. "I hate to interrupt a good fiction reading," Charlotte's voice rang out. She didn't need a microphone, her projection was perfect. "But I prefer non-fiction." "Get out!" Victoria screamed, losing her composure. "This is private property security." "Actually," Charlotte said, continuing her slow walk toward the stage, the crowd parting for her, like the Red Sea. "As of 4:00 p.m. today, this is my property. The foreclosure was expedited due to evidence of fraudulent activity on the mortgage application." She stopped at the foot of the stage, looking up at the trio. The cameras turned away from Victoria and focused solely on Charlotte. "You speak of truth, Victoria," Charlotte said. "Let's share some." She gestured to the man with the laptop. He plugged a cable into the ballroom's projection system. The massive screen behind Victoria, which had been displaying the Prescott family crest, flickered. "Turn it off." Ethan lunged for the cord, but Arthur stepped in his way. Arthur was an older man, but he moved with the speed of a veteran soldier. He caught Ethan's wrist and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to his knees. "Watch," Charlotte commanded. The screen lit up. It wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a video. It was security footage from a hotel bar. The timestamp was 6 months ago. It showed Ethan and Jessica sitting in a booth. "The sound is the best part," Charlotte noted. Audio from the video. "Ethan, when are you going to dump the maid?" Jessica's voice slurred. "Soon," Ethan's voice replied. "I just need her to finish the CAD drawings for the Skyline project. I can't do the math on the load-bearing walls. Once she finishes the work, I'll sign it, sell it, and kick her out. And the money. I've already moved it. The client paid the deposit into the Cayman account. Charlotte thinks the firm is broke. She's paying the electric bill with her savings while I'm buying you this necklace." The crowd gasped. The flashbulbs went crazy. Ethan, still pinned by Arthur, went limp. That's a deep fake," Victoria shrieked. "Technology tricks?" "Is it?" Charlotte asked. "Then let's look at the bank transfers." The screen changed. It showed a flow chart of money, funds from Prescott Architecture moving into an account named Victoria's Gala Fund and another named Jessica Personal. "Embezzlement," Charlotte narrated. "Tax fraud and grand larceny. You were stealing from your own company, Ethan, and hiding it from the IRS. And Victoria, you were using client retainers to pay for your social life." "Lies." Victoria grabbed the microphone stand, wielding it like a weapon. "You hacked our accounts. That's illegal." "Forensic audit," Charlotte corrected. "Perfectly legal when you are the majority creditor." She turned her gaze to Jessica. Jessica was shrinking back, trying to hide behind her chair. "And now for the pièce de résistance," Charlotte said softly. "The air." "Don't," Jessica whispered, her face draining of color. "You claimed to be pregnant with the Prescott heir," Charlotte said. "A boy, wasn't it?" The screen changed again. It was a medical report. "This is a report from Dr. Henderson's clinic," Charlotte read. "Dated 2 weeks ago. Patient Jessica Miller. Diagnosis gastritis. Pregnancy test negative." The room erupted. Laughter, shock, and questions flew through the air. "She's not pregnant." Ethan looked up, betrayal warring with ruin in his eyes. "Jessica, I thought I was," Jessica stammered. "The test was wrong." "You lied," Ethan roared, struggling against Arthur's grip. "You told me we needed the nursery. I bought you a car because of the baby." "And who is the father of this imaginary child?" Charlotte asked, signaling for the next slide. It was a photo of Jessica with another man, a notorious local club owner, dated 3 days prior. They were very much intimate. "It seems Jessica was securing her bets," Charlotte said. Jessica burst into tears and ran off the stage, pushing through the crowd of reporters who shoved microphones in her face. Charlotte climbed the stairs to the stage. She stood next to Victoria, who was trembling with a mix of rage and terror. "You wanted a public spectacle, Victoria?" Charlotte said, her voice dropping so only the matriarch could hear. "You wanted to show the world who I really was. Well, now they know. And they know who you are." Charlotte turned to the microphone. "I am Charlotte Wellington, and I am shutting down Prescott Architecture, effective immediately. The assets will be liquidated to pay back the clients my ex-husband defrauded. As for this house..." She looked around the opulent ballroom. It will be turned into a shelter for women who have been financially abused by their partners. I think that's poetic, don't you? You can't, Victoria whispered. Where will I go? Charlotte looked at her. Really looked at her for the last time. I hear the Honda Civic is still parked on 5th and Main. It has a full tank of gas. I suggest you get to it before it's towed. Charlotte dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud that signaled the end of the Prescott dynasty. She walked off the stage past the flashing cameras, past the ruined Ethan, and out the door. She didn't look back. The dead weight had finally cut loose, and without her, the Prescotts had simply sunk to the bottom. The sound of a jail cell door sliding shut is distinct. It is a heavy metallic finality that resonates in the bones. For Ethan Prescott, it was the loudest sound he had ever heard. He sat on the thin, moth-eaten mattress of the holding cell at the county detention center. His Italian suit, once his armor, was now wrinkled and stained with sweat. His tie had been confiscated, a suicide precaution that felt humiliatingly necessary. Prescott. A guard barked, rapping a baton against the bars. Lawyers here. You got 5 minutes. Ethan scrambled up, hope flaring in his chest. Mother found a way, he thought. She called the senator. She fixed it. He was led into a small room with a scratched plexiglass divider. But it wasn't a high-powered defense attorney sitting on the other side. It was a public defender, a tired-looking man named Mr. Gorski, with coffee stains on his shirt and a stack of files that looked too heavy for him to carry. "Where is Freeman?" Ethan asked, referencing his family's usual attorney. "Where is my mother?" Mr. Gorski sighed, opening a file. Mr. Freeman recused himself. Something about unpaid retainers and a conflict of interest involving the Wellington Group. As for your mother, she's currently being processed in the women's wing. Processed? Ethan's voice squeaked. Tax fraud, Mr. Prescott. Wire fraud. Conspiracy to commit embezzlement. The district attorney is throwing the book at both of you. The evidence provided by the forensic audit was comprehensive. But I didn't know, Ethan pleaded, leaning into the glass. It was just accounting errors. I'm an architect, not an accountant. The emails say otherwise, Gorski said flatly. There are threads where you explicitly instruct your mother to wash the client deposits through her charity account to hide assets from your wife. That's a felony. Several felonies, actually. Ethan slumped back in his chair. Bail! I need bail! Bail is set at $5 million, Gorski said. Given the flight risk and the severity of the financial crimes, do you have $5 million, Mr. Prescott? Ethan put his head in his hands. He had $20 in his wallet when he was arrested. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, reality was crashing down on Victoria Prescott with the force of a tidal wave. She had been released on her own recognizance due to medical concerns, a feigned heart palpitation that bought her a few hours of freedom before the arraignment. She stood in the center of what used to be her living room. The movers hired by the bank were efficient. They were stripping the house. The paintings were gone. The silver was gone. Even the Persian rugs were being rolled up. Careful with that, Victoria snapped at a mover handling a vase. That's Ming Dynasty. It's inventory number 405. The mover grunted, not looking at her. It belongs to the creditors now, lady. Victoria stormed out of the house, clutching her handbag. It contained the last of her emergency stash, a diamond necklace she had hidden from the auditors. She needed cash. She needed a lawyer. She needed to flee to the Caymans. She hailed a cab. Her Mercedes was already impounded, and directed the driver to a high-end pawn shop in the jewelry district. I need an appraisal, Victoria demanded, slamming the necklace onto the velvet counter. And I need cash, quick. The jeweler, A man named Mr. Katz, who had known the Prescotts for years, picked up the necklace. He screwed a loop into his eye and examined it. He looked at it for 5 seconds. Then he took the loop out and looked at Victoria. "I can give you $200 for the setting," Katz said. "The gold is real. 14 carat." "200. Victoria gasped. "Are you insane? Those are VVS diamonds. That necklace is insured for 50,000. They were diamonds," Katz corrected. 10 years ago, but the stones in here now cubic zirconia. High-grade glass." "That's impossible," Victoria whispered. "I've had this safe in my—" She stopped. Her blood ran cold. 6 months ago, Ethan had borrowed the key to her safe. He said he needed to retrieve his grandfather's watch for a cleaning. Ethan. He had swapped the diamonds. He had stolen from his own mother to fund his mistress's lifestyle. Victoria leaned against the counter, her legs giving way. The betrayal wasn't from Charlotte. It wasn't from the world. It was from the son she had molded in her own image. She had taught him to be ruthless, to take what he wanted. And he had taken from her. "Do you want the 200? Katz asked gently. Victoria stared at the fake diamonds. "Keep it," she rasped. She walked out of the shop and onto the rainy sidewalk. She had no money, no home, no friends. Her phone buzzed. It was a notification from a social media app she rarely used. Trending now, the fall of the House of Prescott. She clicked the link. It was a video of Jessica giving an exclusive interview to a gossip site. Jessica was crying fake tears, Victoria knew, and claiming she was a victim of the abusive cult of the Prescott family. She was selling them out for a 15-minute spot of fame. Victoria laughed. It was a ragged, broken sound. She looked down the street, parked at the intersection of 5th and Main, just as Charlotte had promised was the rusty Honda Civic. It was the only thing left. Victoria walked toward it. She opened the door. The smell of stale coffee and vanilla hit her, the smell of the woman she had mocked for 3 years. She sat in the driver's seat. The engine turned over with a struggle. As she pulled into traffic, merging with the common people she so despised, Victoria Prescott realized she wasn't just broke. She was obsolete. 1 year later, the skyline of the city had changed. Where the stalled, half-finished skeleton of the Prescott Tower had once stood a monument to Ethan's hubris, there was now a park. The Charlotte Wellington Community Garden and Art Center. It was a lush green space in the middle of the concrete jungle, teeming with families, artists, and life. From her office on the 50th floor of the Wellington building, Charlotte watched the people below. They looked like ants, but she didn't feel superior to them. She felt connected. Madam Chairwoman. Charlotte turned. Arthur stood in the doorway holding a tablet. He looked healthier than he had in years. The stress of hiding Charlotte's identity had clearly weighed on him, more than he had let on. "Yes, Arthur. The final liquidation report on the Prescott assets," Arthur said, placing the tablet on her desk. "We've settled with all the creditors. Every contractor Ethan stiffed has been paid in full. The debts are cleared." "And the surplus?" Charlotte asked. "Donated to the shelter as instructed." Charlotte nodded, picking up a cup of tea. She walked over to the window. "And them?" She didn't need to use names. "Ethan pled guilty to avoid a 20-year sentence," Arthur recited from memory. "He got 5 years in minimum security. He's currently working in the prison laundry. He's up for parole in 2 years, but given his behavior, he apparently tries to network with the guards. It's unlikely. And Victoria. She's in Florida, managing a motel off the highway. It's not a 5-star establishment." Charlotte took a sip of tea. She expected to feel a surge of triumph, a rush of vindication. But all she felt was a quiet, settling peace. The anger had burned out long ago, leaving behind a fertile ground for her own life to grow. "There is one more thing," Arthur said, a twinkle in his eye. "The architect for the London project is here. Mr. Julian Blackwood. He's waiting in conference room B." Charlotte smiled. Julian was brilliant kind, and had no idea she was a billionaire when they first met online in a design forum. He just liked her sketches. "Tell him I'll be right there," Charlotte said. She checked her reflection in the glass. The woman staring back wasn't the terrified housewife trying to please a narcissist. She wasn't the vengeful ex-wife out for blood. She was Charlotte Wellington. She was powerful. She was free. She walked out of her office, the heels of her shoes clicking a rhythm of progress on the marble floor. Down in the lobby, a tour group was passing through. The guide was pointing at the large portrait of Charlotte that now hung behind the reception desk. "And this," the guide said, "is Charlotte Wellington. She took over the company last year and tripled its charitable contributions. She's known for her philosophy. True worth isn't in what you own, but in who you are." At the back of the tour group, a young woman in a faded coat lingered. It was Jessica. She looked older, harder. She held a baby in her arms, a real one this time, fathered by a bartender who had already left town. Jessica looked at the portrait of Charlotte. The diamonds, the confidence, the kindness in the eyes. "I knew her," Jessica whispered to the woman next to her. "Yeah, right," the stranger scoffed, moving away. "And I know the Queen of England." Jessica watched the elevator doors close as Charlotte stepped in, heading up to the sky. Jessica adjusted her baby, felt the weight of her mistakes in her empty pockets, and turned to walk back out into the rain. Charlotte didn't look down. She was too busy looking up. The elevator rose, carrying her toward the clouds, toward the future, and toward a life that was finally, truly her own. The story of Charlotte Wellington is a reminder that dignity is quiet, while arrogance is loud. Ethan and Victoria Prescott built their lives on the shifting sands of status and deceit, believing that wealth made them superior. But when the tide came in, they discovered that without character, money is just paper, and status is just a shadow. Charlotte proved that true power doesn't come from humiliating others. It comes from knowing your own worth when the world tries to strip it away. She didn't just divorce a husband. She divorced a mindset that equated kindness with weakness. In the end, the dead weight was the only thing holding them up, and once she was gone, they had nothing left but their own reflection. If you enjoyed this story of justice, revenge, and redemption, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs a reminder that the best revenge is massive success. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. We drop new dramas every week. Thanks for watching.